Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, look at that. You guys are awake. I like spring. So, thank you for coming to this Easter Sunday. So, happy Easter. Thank you for those who joined us online. So, today we're going to have a lecture done by our friend Marco, and he will talk about the beginning of life and our evolution. But as we always do, before that, Daniel is going to do the initial reading for us, and then we'll do the prayer.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to be reading the book Happy Life today.
Fala mais alto.
Whenever you can bathe in
Louder.
oh, whenever you can bathe in the moonlight of prayer, create mental space and search for the sources of life where you will find pure energy and peace. All the saints and mystics who have changed humanity's moral course of the better in the East or the West are unanimous in recommending prayer as the most effective resource to preserve oneself or attain inner harmony. Jesus maintained friendly relations with his disciples and the people, but still reserved time to talk with God through prayer and exalting the excellence of these sublime conversations. So leave the tumults you are submerged in and move in the direction of the oasis of prayer to refresh and bathe yourself in peace. Thank you.
So let's now elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus and all the beloved spirits present here today. Let's ask them to open our minds and our hearts for the lecture of today, that we may be able to learn a little bit more in the way of our evolution. Thank you. So be it.
All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good
morning. So thank you all for coming this beautiful Easter Sunday. The topic that was chosen for me today, based on our scheduling to talk about, was like the beginning of life and evolution. So I wanted to talk to you guys. So I'm also going to be talking a little bit about life as the idea of material life, like the biological life. And I'm also going to be talking about us as spirits and kind of how we came together, how creation happened, and then bringing those two things together, like the book Evolution Two Worlds discuss, right? So basically the lecture is based on Genesis today by Allan Kardec, Evolution Two Worlds by Chico Xavier, André Luiz, and Val Vieira, and a kind of a summary of wrapping up that with our scientific knowledge, okay? So, first of all, I'd like to start with something that Allan Kardec mentions to us a long time ago in the Spirit's book. That's question number 799. So he says that he has the Spirits about about Spiritism and the relation to Spiritism now as a new term coined from Allan Kardec in our life, right? And in his comment, he will say, Spiritism is to help humankind improve their moral and intellectual progression, right? As the idea of the two wings, right, that we always talk about, right? So we can't really evolve, right, if we not evolve morally, right, and if we don't evolve intellectually at the same time, right? Because if you start to evolve intellectually only, right, without the moral component, we know where it leads us, right? Unfortunately, it leads us to these false leaders, like to destruction, right, to war, to all sorts of things that humanity has seen so many times, right? So we're today mostly focusing on this particular concept of the evolution in the two worlds, right? So biological, moral, intellectual. So how do we start? So we start in 1868, and 1868 is when the Genesis was first published, and this is kind of interesting because around the time, just like a context here, so we all know what we're talking about, right? So 1868, that's when the 14th Amendment. Yes, yeah, it's okay. No, it's fine. Yeah,
Sure?
yeah.
Okay.
Can you load the slides?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can turn it on. I'll just turn it on. I'm not. You guys can see the slides too. No, it has a trick. It has twice, I think. Or hold it. Let's see. There you go. Hold it. It always has a trick, this thing. Okay. So in 1868, when the Genesis was being published, that was when the 14th Amendment was published, right? It was proclaimed. And that's the civil rights movement, for those of you who remember a little bit of history. And I always like to time it, right? Because if you think about all the way in Europe, we're talking about Genesis, miracles, and predictions, right? And here in North America, we're doing this incredible hallmark of equality, right? Of ability to exert its rights. So that's the next one. To exert its rights, protected by the 14th Amendment in the United States. A lot of things are happening scientifically too, like things like multiple sclerosis was diagnosed in 1868 for the first time, right? We didn't know what caused it at the time, but now we know a little bit better, right? A lot of scientific evidence, like for example, helium, the gas, was actually discovered in 1868. It's like a lot of facts. So just to tell you that a lot of things are happening around that time, right? And obviously here Allan Kardec presenting to us this magnificent work of the Genesis, right? So what's about the Genesis? So the Genesis is actually three different things, right, in the same book. So it talks about Genesis as the creation of the universe, of the spirit, of us, like in its entire concept of Mosaic Genesis, scientific Genesis, and blending it all together and explaining to us. But also talks about miracles, right? Talks about explanations about what a miracle is. And then the tail end of it talks about predictions, right? So there's three different things within that same book, right? But if I can summarize the creation in that concept, right? So there'll be something that looks like this, right? So in the next slide, you'll see how the creation was divided, and things will start to pop up in a minute. So you can click one more time. So we're going to see the God as the creator of everything we know that we are living with, created what we call universal cosmic fluid, right? Within the universal cosmic fluid, all the physical aspects of universal laws apply. So that's within that fluid, or we don't have a better name for it. I wish we could describe it scientifically and tell exactly what that is, but we can't. In that concept, in that universal cosmic fluid, depending on how that is manipulated or changed, right? So we can give rise to the planets, like everything we have in our planets here, what we call the material principle, right? So our physical bodies, biological things, biological systems, organic material, mineral kingdom, everything comes from that universal cosmic fluid. And in parallel to that, there is this other poorly defined, but we all know what we're talking about, where it's like this whole spiritual principle, right? Which is unique and individual for every one of us, right? And as Kardec describes, created, and the Spirit describes to Kardec, it's created simple, right? Ignorant in a sense that it's like a blank page, right? We were created in a way that, just like a book, when we start writing it, there's a pen, there's a piece of paper, and we write that story, right? So we have the free will to do that. But we are created as part of the spiritual principle, which in its case will give rise to us as spirits, right? So there's these two major branches of the creation, right? That are that's explained on both the Spirit's book and the Genesis, right? As we have. Now that's kind of interesting because, as you can probably realize now, the laws that apply to physical systems, which are within the material principle, do not necessarily apply to the spiritual principle, right? So the idea of a moral compass applies mostly to what we call the spiritual principle, right? That's how we evolve, right? And laws of gravity and other laws of physics, right, will apply to the material principle, right? But both of them are evolving at the same time, right? That's how evolution occurs. Now, what does science say about all of this, right? And I'm not going to really talk too much about the Mosaic version of creation. Obviously, we know that that is an interpretation of creation that was adequate for that time, right? The idea of of Adam, right? Biting, the apple story and the snake and all of that stuff. That was great, right? For that particular time to represent free will, right? Moral evolution, understanding laws of God, and all those concepts embedded into that story. But it's not really representative of this. And also, as well as the universe has been created in 7 days, as we described in the Bible, that is an interesting concept for that time too, right? And we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but we can have like in the Genesis, Allan Kardec brings a comparative between the biblical creation and the scientific creation, which is quite interesting. I would recommend you guys read because there's nice connections between these two stories, right? It's not really the theme of today. Right. So what does science tell us, right? So see if we can make this work. Right, Kel?
You should.
Yeah.
Is it on?
No. Let's see.
No.
Oh, if it's on, it helps. I heard that before. Okay. Let's see if that works. Oh, Kel, look, I'm going the wrong way. Look at that. Oh, got it. Yes. Bingo. I know. So this is the like a big summary of the concept of the Big Bang, which is what we scientifically understand as the creation, right? Now, interesting things that I added here, though, like you guys are going to realize that there are things that are not represented here by our scientific understanding. Right there. So we have the spiritual development happening at the same time, right? Within that material concept that is represented by the Big Bang, which is obviously not represented in science, but we know it's happening. And we have creation here, represented by God, the Creator, right? Which we actually don't know, right? That relationship, which is interesting because there's a lot of philosophers and scientists that tap on that concept, right? We know that God's perfect, immutable, one only, right? Has all the power, has the love, right? Everything. We know all of that. So we know concepts of God, right? But we can't really, or we're not ready yet to fully grasp the idea of what God is, right? So in a way, to think about this may be like one of the tiny little tips of the creative thought of God being creating this entire Big Bang and everything we live on. And you can think about God being before that unique moment in time where the universe was created. God was already there because he's, obviously he's the creator, so it has to be there before the creation, right? So the creation has to be perfect because God is perfect, right? So it's governed by its own rules. And we know that scientifically, we know that the law of gravity actually dictates all this relationship with all the stars. Everything you see in the Big Bang is basically organized and ruled by one single law. Now think about that. Like, can't you think about other perfection than this? In other words, God does not need to go in there and tweak things up, right? Because he's perfect, it was created perfect, and the same law applies to the entire creation. Now, if that is not enough to convince of perfection of God, I don't know what it is, right? Because that is really where you take science and applies to like a concept of being a creator, being perfect, right? So there you go. So we have this first moment here where now we can detect we're somewhere in here at the tail end of this, but we now understand that things are moving apart from each other. There's radiation that emanates from somewhere at the beginning of this creation that we can detect. We know by many different experiments that the predictions of our own models actually match what we see in the expansion model. In other words, if you trace that back, at some point, there was a unique point in time of creation, right? So we call Big Bang. So that's all good, right? Now, how does we now fit in all of this, right? So that is interesting because that comes another concept that we are what we call co-creators, right? What does that mean? So the way the spiritual principle and the universal cosmic fluid are created, right, by God, allows the spirits, us, right, to also modulate and change and interact with matter, right? So we can change things, right? So we co-create with God. In other words, we can tweak, right, that process, right? Now, obviously, you can think about it, right? We can make things more smooth and fast and precise, or we can mess up things a little bit, right? Because of our free will, right? So that is really what the real changes that you see in the process of creation and evolution are really dictated by us, right? Because for God, everything was already planned out from day one, and from His perfection, they're not going to change, right? So that taps into our minds now. Let me think. So here's an example. So we always think about, God. We pray to God. It's like, God, let's change this. Like, let's make whatever happen, right? Let's make this happen. Like, think about this. Like, if God had to come in here, right? And I don't like he because it's not a real person, but if God, let's take the pronouns out of the question. But if God had to come here, right, and change things to one, that would be kind of chaotic, right? Can you imagine a system that someone has to go in there every day and change things out? Like, combine that to trillions of years, what's going to happen, right? So really, God doesn't really do any of that, right? Because perfection is already there. So He puts the responsibility back 100% into us, right? So maybe when we're praying, then we're saying, maybe God, so maybe give me the wisdom and the moral compass, or the ability to cope with the challenge that I have created to myself, right? Instead of asking for things to change, right? Think about it. It's an important concept, because we keep saying, if I ask anyone here, everyone say, is God perfect? Everyone's like, oh, what? You're asking me this question? Don't ask me this. Of course God is perfect. But in our daily lives, we question it all the time. We do, right? If you don't, tell me, because I need to learn from you, because I'll tell me, I'm going to be like, oh, why is God did this to me, right? All the time, right? And that is the concept, that although we believe in the idea, we don't put it into practice. We don't take it, right? So that is one of the interesting concepts when you put the idea of creation towards us, right? So how is this all created? So obviously we know that if you go from the big constellations to galaxies, planets, and you go down in that tiny little spectrum of creation, you find this very, very tiny concept of an atom, right? That now we know that the atoms can be divided by so many different ways, right? Even the nuclear component of the atom now can be divided in subparticles, and subparticles now in other particles. And there you go, up to a point that the atom is really like an empty space, right? So now we can understand, for example, why, when we're we're in this environment here, there are many different levels or possible layers of energy and influence on us that we're completely oblivious to, right? If you think about, if I'm the nucleus of an atom, right? The next thing I'm going to see is an electron going around beyond Lake Ontario from me. Think about that entire space, right? Defined by some sort of energy that connects those two things. So we are an aggregator of manipulation, of a densification of that energy into a pattern. That's who we are, right? So you can take that and transform into a chair or the ground or us, right? Any biological system. So think about perfection. So you're creating the entire universe based on one single rule and one single component, which is this source of energy that comes from universal cosmic fluid that can be manipulated and changed and in any way you want to form anything possible. That's perfection, right? Now we're starting to grasp a tiny little bit of it, right? Based on our own science here. There are some worlds out there, they've already know this, right? A light years ahead of us, right? And they can change the world according to, so their co-creation is a lot easier for them, right? They know exactly what to do. Like in more evolved planets, by the action of their own thoughts, they can probably modify their entire planet. Maybe we can do that, but we don't know. We're kind of learning that yet, right? But by the time we realize that we're all immersed in this universal cosmic fluid, that we can manipulate it in any way we want, we have the power to do it. And by the actions of our own thoughts, we can actually change the entire environment. When we really grasp that concept, we're going to achieve wonders, right? And we all believe in it. Because if I say here, did God create us? Everybody's going to say yes, right? So if God created us and we're part of the creation, then can we work together to change or be co-creators? Yes. How do we do it? Taking a machete and cutting down a tree? No. That's how our ancestors used to do, right? Physical, like cutting things. Can we change it by our own actions and thoughts? Absolutely. 10 times more than anything else we could possibly do physically, right? Because we're combining, remember, the spiritual principle and the physical principle, right? When you change getting rocks and making to the wall, you're actually working on the physical principles, only the material principle, right? But when we're engaging with our intelligence, our moral compass, our thoughts, our actions, then you're combining those two things. That's exactly what God wanted for us from the beginning, right? To work together, right? To evolve the world. Okay. So now there are multiple worlds here, right? We know physically and spiritually speaking, right? And Spirit's book talks about this, the multitude of inhabited worlds. We have that in the entire, all the series of books from Kardec. We have that referred in many other examples too, through André Louise and many other mediums. So think about this. So imagine if you believe that now the spirits are part of this, right? So of course, the spirits are present through this entire process of evolution. Now, to think that we're the only planets in the entire universe that has biological life, that's key, isn't it? Now, more than that, to think that now we're the only ones that have life altogether and a sense of a spiritual life, that is even worse, right? Because every single one of those worlds are inhabited by some type of spiritual colony or people or environment, right? Now, the way they incarnate, totally different depending on the world, right? How is that? Well, remember when we talked about this material principle? You know, the spirit is a kind of a separate branch of evolution, but within that material principle lies also our spiritual body, right? That we're going to talk about now. So just to show you where we are, let me show you where we are here before I move on from this slide. There you go. So there you go. We're there. Okay. And probably there's another star in front of us, so we're probably behind that one that we're seeing there near somehow. But anyway, just to show you perspectives, right, of the creation and the perfection of the creation, right, that we barely grasp, right? Now, if you think about this, we're here. So now interconnecting, right, the two things. So the formation of the universe, creation of the universe. So a religion which has no point of contradiction with the laws of nature will have nothing to fear from progress and will be invulnerable, Allan Kardec, right? Isn't that true, right? That's a basic concept, right? That's what we're trying to do here, right? He even says, like, if you find another concept that explains things better than what I'm telling you, go for it. Now, how about that? That is a true academic, scientific spirit speaking, right? Because that's exactly what I would say to any one of my students. Like we're creating this pathway, we're studying the lab, and we're testing A, B, and C. If you show me a result that shows me the results against what I'm telling you, let's explore that. because why not, right? That's the truth, right? So that's the same thing for religions, right? So spiritual and material worlds are inseparable from each other. Yes, as we just talked about, it's like a big summary, right? We come together, we're interacting together all the time, right? The original concepts of creation, right? We talked. We don't have a lot of time to discuss it, but that comes from Thales, Ptolemy, Galileo. They all talk about concepts of the creation of the universe, and the current knowledge is really law of gravity, attraction, electricity, other sorts of energy that we can detect. And now we just got news a couple weeks ago that one of the very first radio waves with some sort of intelligent pattern were picked up by our telescopes that detect the radiation coming from space, which is to science seems to be like a breakthrough. For me, it's like, sure, we need to build better antennas, right? Or we need to detect something else that we don't even know what it is, right? We're detecting radio waves, like we're expecting every other spirit in the universe to use radio waves too. They're probably like, why are you using radio waves? That's so archaic, why don't you have detecting this, right? Which, like for example, in Andrea Louis' books, when they bring an iPad to analyze the spirit of other spirits, right? They're using an iPad, they're touching it, and we're now having iPads in our hands, right? We're thinking we're so smart, right? We're just learning trickles, right, of the spiritual world. That's what's happening. And yeah, we're going to continue talking about that. So let's talk about the spirit now, right? And that's where, most of our journey will continue from now on, right? So, it's very common for you to find someone talking about the evolution of two worlds as a kind of a challenging book, right? And I get it. I mean, it requires you to really review some concepts that you have, right? Some predetermined concepts that are going to be constantly challenging by Andrea Louise, right? Now, this book is interesting. There's two parts of it. And if you guys remember, Chico and Valdo, they actually alternated the chapters, right? They write at the same time, but alternating chapters. And they all fit together beautifully, right? Another thing that I hear a lot about this book is like, because this is one of my favorite books, I'm totally biased. So I'm starting right there. I'll let you guys know that ahead of time. But a lot of people tell me, oh, this is mostly like some sort of a scientific endeavor book, right? That's not true. That's actually one of the most consoling books. If you get the concepts, though, right? That's the thing, right? If you truly understand what Andrea Louise is trying to tell you, that is really the consoling part. Because then you can look at yourself like, wow, like this is how it's done. This is what happened. So therefore, this is what I need to do, right? So the concepts are there. You just have to take it and actually put your next step into that concept, right? That's one thing that's important, right? For example, gives this like one of the fundamental concepts of this book, that idea that we can always change everything, right? Not only us, but the environment, right? We can change any scenario that you can possibly think it's impossible to break through. It's possible. Anything's possible. Moving mountains is possible. Jesus told us that, right? So this book brings you the evidence, like the know-how, how to do it, right? It's like how to think about this, right? And obviously, one concept that we talked about many times today, the idea of the co-creation, right? And the more evolved you are, like I explained to you, the more you can change circumstances, environment, everything. You can manipulate the universal cosmic fluid to do anything, right? For example, when our planet was being formed, he already met with a number of other spirits in the same realm, Jesus, and they said, this is what we're going to need from this planet, right? We're going to have this scenario. We're going to need this. We're going to organize that. So they manipulate the entire cosmic fluid, energy, everything you can imagine, to allow us to have a specific planet that we as a group of spirits can be here today. So we think about Jesus like, yeah, Jesus was crucified and all of this. Jesus is like 1,000,000 times 1,000,000 that, right? The imagery that we build of Jesus being crucified, can attract people through suffering. I got that. But if you really understand what Jesus is, it's a lot more than anything we can properly image, because we don't even grasp that idea, right? Can you imagine someone coming to that range of evolution before that, right? When the world was creating the galaxies, they have a meeting and say, okay, let's do this galaxy now. We can barely build a Lego without instructions, right? Like if I give you an instruction book with more than 200 pieces, you're probably going to struggle a little bit, right? So it's like, oh, how does this go? Like it doesn't tell me. Like it flipped. So Lego created now this thing that you put an arrow going around, so to show you, like, see, you have to flip this thing, right? Because it's not going to work, right? Now think about that. Think about Jesus now coming with the Gurudana spirits. This is the entire thing is being evolved, like is being formed, and they're defining what a galaxy is going to look like. I cannot grasp that idea, right? It's just too much for me to understand, right? If it's too much for me to understand, for us to understand, who lived in this planet for I don't know how many incarnations now, think about us 2,000 years ago, sitting on the dirt, trying to catch fish, and someone explaining to us that what is a universal cosmic fluid, right? We're going to be burned in the fire that was just beside with the fish, right? But really concept, right? So how do they create? How Moses explained that? Well, there's like this thing. There's a waters from above, water from below. There's this a magic dome with waters on top, and all this. It's like this is how it was created at that time. So see, we're also evolving, right? Together with concepts. That's what this book talks about, right? And also, again, the more evolved the spirit is, the more responsibility and the more ability to change things. So if you think about the idea of Christ basically reshaping entire galaxies with his creative thought, right? Together with the law of creation, right? The law of God. So can we imagine what we could do? It's not to be kind of put ourselves out too much down to say, well, I can't do anything. Yeah, we can, right? So that's what this book brings. Actually, we can't do any of that. We can. But do we have the faith to do it? Can we really use the help from the spiritual world? Can we really use all of that energy to do something, right? That's what we're talking about today. I know the topic is evolution, but really that's the idea, right, of the evolution part. Okay. So here we go. So now I'm going to go into some of the interesting concepts about spiritual evolution, right? So this is an interesting cartoon, right? And I borrowed it from I think it's from a Vanessa Saloni and Spiritist counselor thing. There's always this interesting idea about what is a spiritual principle, what is really a spirit, like we are, like in a more evolved senses, right? The reason why we bring this is just to solidify some of those concepts that there's always this question that's going to pop anywhere, like the internet and spiritist groups, like do animals have spirits? Do this have spirits? Like do plants have spirits? Right? All those sorts of things, right? So interesting enough, so everything that's alive has what we call a vital principle, right? That's the energy that life itself creates, right? So any living thing will have what we call a vital principle, which is not a spirit, right? It's just the biological system working, right? So photosynthesis, right? That generates vital energy, right? You cut that leaf off, the leaf kind of dries out, the energy goes away. That's the vital principle, right? Now, there's the other principle now, which is a spiritual principle. Like us, we're created as like a blank page. That's what we call a spiritual principle. So that spiritual principle has to evolve, and it evolves in very different scenarios and places and worlds and entities, whatever you can think about. I cannot think about that. I think there's way too much there for me to realize. But the concept is there's this evolution of the spiritual principle too. And now we know that we, incarnated now as humans, we can call this a spirit. Terminology means that spiritual principle is mature enough that now we can actually understand who we really are, right? We are spirits. In other words, this type of spirit that we are right now, we've been through a lot, right? And we can't really go back. As a spirit, I can't go back and reincarnate in something that it does not allow me. There's incompatibilities, right? Me as a spirit, I can't incarnate back in something that is kind of before me, right? But bodies and worlds will adapt. So we as a spirit will also incarnate in different worlds and different things, right? So that will continue. So we're not the beginning and we're not the end, right? We're somewhere in the middle. But Kardec created the idea of a spirit being who we are now, just because we've been already through many of that beginning process, right? Does that mean that I've incarnated in an animal? I don't know. Like, don't ask me that question. That's very hard to tell. I don't know. Did I incarnate in another world? Probably, right? What is the path for me to get to where we are now? Don't ask me. Don't ask us. I don't know. Right? If someone tells you they know, it's a problem because we don't know, right? Do we necessarily have to go through an animal in this planet to be where we are? Probably not. No. Why do we have to do that? We're trying to define, see, what we're trying to do is to define evolution, right? As we see an evolution of a biological system. We see the biological system growing, right? And we think the spiritual evolution matches that. No. We as spirits are there since that first time of, like a long time ago in creation, right? So we're a lot more complex than anything we see around us, right? So that's kind of to take away some of that numerous questions that come constantly, right? So if you ask, does an animal have a spirit? Well, there's a spiritual principle in that animal for sure, right? That's still learning, right? That's still living on the situation where they need, right? Will that animal one day have a spirit? No, because by the time the spirit evolved, then the spirit's going to be in another type of animal, right? Another body, much more complicated and complex, right? So forth and so on, right? So again, don't let your eyes fool you. In other words, don't think about 20,000 years of biological evolution in this planet represents the entire spiritual evolution of who we are. It does not match, right? Our spiritual evolution goes way, way, way before that, okay? One of the concepts I like to talk about, because you're going to hear this some lectures out there, some people talking about this, and you may hear that people having this very fancy, complex explanation of how this has to go here and goes there. We don't know that because we're not even allowed to know that, because we're probably going to blow our minds, just like the fisherman, right? If you try to explain to them what was universal cosmic fluid, right? We're actually at that stage, okay? So there you go. So this is the organic genesis, right? So we know that atoms, right, from the mineral world, organic compounds, they're all formed by these tiny little particles, and a particular combination of organic compounds can form life as its primordial essence, right? There's a biological reaction happening, and that obviously is embedded into the vital principle, and that can slowly evolve. Like everything evolves. The rock evolves, the planet evolves, the universe evolves, we evolve, everything, because that is the perfection of the creation, right? So the rock that becomes as lava, that cools down, becomes all sharp and angled, turns round, and then ended up being part of another part of creation, that's the evolution of the rock. Why not, right? So, and we obviously now much more way ahead of that. We can now evolve things and co-create in a much, much bigger scheme of things, right? And I really like this cartoon here, which kind of represents that a little bit. So, so through many different steps here from our own planets, this is all about our planet now, right? It's obviously a lot of different things can occur in different worlds, right? So we have all here this history of evolution of our planet, right? So Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic periods, and then all these animals that lived right through this time, and here we are, kind of hanging on right at the edge. So this is in millions of years, right? So 2.5 billion before Earth created about 4.6 billion years ago, and that's how the evolution works. So from the very first time when this kind of warm, fiery, stormy world, this atoms came together and formed the first protein that has a biological activity. That's how life started on our planet, right? That protein complex that started to do something has really no spirit on it, obviously, right? It's not ready to accept that, but it had a vital principle, right? It was alive, right? And then through our planet becomes several rounds of evolution, right? So we have fish developing, right? Dinosaurs, right? There's extinction happening multiple times. There's freezing cycles, warming cycles, stormy cycles, all of those things, all part of evolution, all planned and organized, right? So all of those things have a vital principle, right? And then at some point here, these biological entities become so organized that they can start to give receptive to certain spiritual principles that are very early on in evolution, right? They don't have a lot of connections, they don't have a lot of skills, but they accept the spiritual principle, right? And then what really changes, like very close to us now, somewhere in here, part of the creation. So spirits that are much more evolved, right, from other worlds, come and incarnate in our world, because they don't fit in the other world anymore. See, their world evolved. They passed us by a long time, right? Energetically, they can't incarnate in that world anymore. They're vibrating too low. They're not at that same standard, right? They're basic safe. Sorry, guys, we have to keep going. So God is perfect because they allow those spirits to come to an inferior evolved world, us, right? And kind of bump us up. So that's exactly happens in this what we call the spiritual emigrations or migrations, right? Obviously well known, the spirits from Capella that came in different parts of the world with different skills, right? And pushed us in evolution dramatically, right? From a more humanoid figures like Neanderthals, right? To a much more evolved body, because the spirit that incarnates also changes the genetic expression of the body, right? Because we are connected, right? So those spirit immigrations and immigrations allowed us to really, really boost our evolution and allow us to be here and talking about all those things, right? And connect better to the spiritual world and learn from the spiritual world, right? Bringing technology from the spiritual world, arts, science, right? We know André Luiz is so good about this, like, because all his books, it talks about, oh, the guys were singing that song, da 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 da, and then he himself like, oh my God, I heard that before, kind of a different way. In a way, it's like we kind of grasp on some of the culture ideas and developments in the spiritual world, right? And we bring them to the incarnate world. So we both evolve together, right? Technology, arts, right? Music, science, all of that. So that is kind of a summary of the evolution of our planet, both in the spiritual side and the physical side, right? All right. A few more concepts, right? We're going to talk about today. Right. So the spirits book. So have some spirits being created good and others bad? That's a question that a lot of people have, right? And we know the answer, right? That no, we're created simple and ignorant. In other words, without knowledge, like ignorant, not the way we use it today, right? We use the word ignorant in a very different way, right? God has given each a mission, right? It is aimed at enlightening them and progressively leading them towards perfection. See? Through knowledge of the truth in order to draw them near to God. So cannot be more consoling than this. Like whenever you feel like that's it, I'm done, this is too much for me, think about this. You will be perfect one day. There's no escape from it. You know that some philosophers pretty much killed themselves because of this. So some philosophers could not understand the idea that they were free. Think about this, crazy, right? We're free to think. We're not free to do what we want, right? But we can't control our thoughts completely. We're learning to do that, right? But we are completely free in the concept that I can even think about who am I and all of that, but I cannot escape the truth that I'm free to think. I cannot escape the truth that I will be perfect. It's the truth. It's a fact. It's creation, right? So that's consoling, right? Now we got to do our part, right? We know about that. So then all spirits of their origin ignorant and inexperienced like children, like that's what Allan Kardec is asking now, who gradually acquire knowledge they lack by passing through the different planes of human life. Yes, this is an accurate comparison, right? How much children improve depends on their behavior, rebelliousness, right? Children's spirits remain ignorant and imperfect. Sometimes if you rebel against it, right? If you try to fight the moral compass, if you try to fight the law of love, you kind of stay behind a little bit, right? Not forever, but we'll slow down things. So whenever you feel that that's it, I'm done, this is too much for me, I can't take this anymore, think like a children that is being kind of rebellious, right? And I like to compare with children all the time because not because I have 3 of them, you know, and they're young, and I have to do this every single day as an exercise, right? Stop this, do that. No, it's like they're fighting and arguing and all these things. And, you know, the little one wants to go up the stairs, like 10th flight of stairs, and wants to jump down from there because it sounds fun, right? So we have to have someone out there that stops them and say, can you please stop this? And then the next thing she's gonna do is like she's gonna cry like the world's about to end, like rebelliousness. Oh my God, I'm being taken away from my ability to jump off the stairs. How can he do that to me? That's us. With God. God is giving you a mission, a lesson. So we have to take it. So we learn, right? Whenever we get to the mission, it's tough. Someone sometimes going to say, well, sorry, this is all we're going to have to go through now. And what we're going to do? Why God's doing this to me? I cannot believe it. I don't deserve it. I really want to jump into this massive hole that I created for myself. God is trying to stop me, but I really want to do it. That's a kid. 100%. That's my 2-year-old. You want to learn? Go to my house. Spend a day with me. And I'll show you, like in real time, who we are, morally speaking, towards God is exactly how she is right now in her stage. That she's in a stage of evolution that the laws are not inside of her. They're completely outside. She has zero concept of the laws of evolution. And we know that. Piaget told us that. Pestalozzi told us that. Like, this is very well known, right? So in that stage of evolution that she is, again, the laws are completely outside of her. So there is always this rebelliousness coming in, right? Because someone has to impose the law on her. Otherwise, things are going to be really, really bad, right? But many of us are still in that same stage of evolution towards God and the divine laws, right? In other words, the laws are still outside of us. We can't really grab them. They're not inside our hearts, right? So whenever we face the law and we bump against it, we're going to rebel against that, right? Because we can't see beyond that, right? And we feel like we're being punished, right, by the law. But it's the perfect contrary to that. We're being guided, right? It's just that the way we're being guided, that what we have to do sometimes is the toughest thing. It's not an easy thing. But how many times we think about that, we're in the middle of the storm. If you say, occasionally, I would say, congratulations to you, because I'll say never. I never do that. I'll do that a day after. And I'll be like, oh my God, yeah, I gotta learn that, right? But in the middle of the eye of the storm, we're always like, rah, we're ready to fight. That's our very early instinctive behavior, right? Now, certain laws are inside of us, right? Just like my 2-year-old, when she's going around, and now she understands that for her to get food, there's certain things she needs to do, right? It's not hard. She has to ask, right? Believe me, they don't know that. So in the beginning, instead of asking, what would she do? Cry, right? There you go. So they'll cry all the it's like, what's going on? It's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, try food, try this, clean that, do that. No, it doesn't work. Okay, give her food. We got it. We passed that, right? Now she already learned that. It's inside of her. So she'll food's like, Daddy, I'm hungry. Daddy, milk. Daddy, milk. I was like, oh, perfect. It's inside of her now. Just give her milk. Perfect, right? So we do that too, right? So we, for example, know probably that we can't really, I don't know, I'll give you an obvious one, right? We can't kill another person, right? Most of us, not all of us, but most of us got that to a point that whenever that feeling comes through, we cut it out. It's like, I can't do that. That's a no. That's already inside of me. I don't need anyone to tell me. I don't need a police officer to be by my side all the time. I got that one. Yes, that's next, right? So there are some concepts that we continue to put on our inside ourselves, and that's evolution, right? That we learn and we practice, that becomes a norm, right? Just like the kid, right? So that is really what the children's behavior that the spirits are taught. And I cannot find anything that describes it better. And again, if you want to do a training, yeah, come spend a weekend with me. We're going to learn a lot together, and so that's the spiritual side. And the biological evolution, that is actually the easiest one to understand, right? Because believe it or not, biological evolution kind of is a fun mix of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, phosphorus, and nitrogen, arranged in funny ways, right? And in different ways, you organize it, polymerize it, and form different structures. That's really what brings biological life, right? And the vital principle, obviously, is this principle that's active into that living, we talked about, into the living organism, okay? All right. So now the tail end of it, about to finish. We're going to talk about, that's just like from my research, like a cancer cell, a breast cancer cell. So how do we bring this together now? Okay, so that is the fun part. Okay, so we know that 1 is the spiritual principle, 2 is the material principle. Now, how do we interact? So can a spirit directly interact with the physical material world? Not really. No, there's really not a good way of doing it, right? The type of creation, the vibration, the elements, everything is different. It was created differently, right? In these 2 avenues of evolution. So we need this interacting thing, right, that allows that to happen. And that is why the spiritual body is, or the perispirit, right, is so important in this concept, right? Because that's really what is going to allow that for us to interact back and forth, right? So that's how, for example, we as a spirit bringing this baggage, when we incarnate into this body, our spiritual body will translate everything we've done before into changes to our physical body, right? So some diseases can happen, some qualities will show up, right? Both negative and positive things, right? Also, it allows us to interact with our world, right? Through very interesting connections that occur all the way from the brain, from the energy centers, right? Interconnecting every gland, every system in our body with our spiritual perispirit, which in other terms connect to our spirit, through we can express ourselves, right? And that goes back to why we as a spirit cannot incarnate in other lower level developing biological systems. Because of that, we can't. There's no connection anymore, right? It's a very complicated connection. Okay. And of course, this is here. So how does evolution occur in that level? So there you go. So we have immigration and emigration of spirits that are much more evolved, that will come to less evolved worlds, that will push that body, right, to move faster in evolution, right? And then, we can, for the perispirit, we draw from the elements of the world we live in. So if we go to another planet, the perispirit will look different, right? We'll have different elements, different vibration, different, how dense or less dense, right, it is, right? Additional help from mentors and specialized spirits, of course, because there are spirits specialized in just organizing that for us. Thank God, right? Can you imagine if you have to think about all of that? And I'm still struggling with the Lego build, that kind of thing. And then again, incarnating, there's evolved physical body allows the incarnation of more evolved spirits, right? So the more the body evolves, the more allows for incarnation of more evolved spirits. The whole concept of planetary transition is about that, right? Creating environments where it allows the incarnation of certain spirits and disallow the incarnation of certain spirits, because now there's barriers, right? So in other words, if we're really not catching up and we're still struggling with basic concepts that are not inside of us, we're going to be dropped from this world and move to the next one. But beauty is we're going to help someone, even if we don't want to, right? That's perfection, right? And then co-creation influences the evolution of the physical body and also the planet. Bingo. So here I can summarize to you the entire concept of how a world evolves in the spiritual principle and the spirit and perispirit at the same time, right? We have descriptions of that, for example, like life and spirits and Saturn and other planets, where the perispirit is so thin, there's like you don't need that interaction of like a half density perispirit like the one we have on Earth, for example, right? And we here obviously can modulate and change the perispirit in many different ways. So we can see spirits, yes, right? Spirits can actually change the perispiritual body to allow it to be visible. It's possible, yeah, in specific scenarios with mediums that can help them, right? That's easy, it can do, right? But we don't need that to happen all the time, right? We're so interested in seeing apparitions and shows up things, and we forget about being good to others, right? So that's another bad thing about we don't learn spiritism that much, right? We're so excited about healing and powers of things, and we're nasty to each other, right? What does that do? Zero, right? It's a distraction, okay? So think about that too, okay? All right, and there you go. And now how can we influence that? There's another summary here. And sorry, my obsessors here are kind of looking white for some reason. Yeah. So again, how now this is from Mechanism of Mediumship and also Spirit's book and Saúde Espiritual by Alírio. So what's happening here? So here we are, incarnated, spirit, physical body, perispirit, right? Can we change our perispirit to carry on all the stress, selfishness, pride, hate, smoking, alcohol, lifestyle, nutrition, everything we do is going to be directly translated into our perispirit, right? Because it carries that. And we're going to be influenced, right? There's this little guys here. They're more than happy to embolden that negativity on us sometimes, or the good things too. I don't know. It depends, right? Depends on how we're vibrating, right? Obviously, when we go back to the body again, what happens? All of that we accumulated in the perispirit is going to somehow has to be cleared through our physical body again. Direct influence. So our perispirit connects to every cell in our body. So if our perispirit carries the consequences of the things I've done in the past, that cell that's connected to the perispirit will suffer. Can that cause increased risk of disease? 100%. DNA mutation? Sure it will, right? A lot of things, right? But perfection. Why is this happening? To clear us from all of what we've done. That's part of the process. But we don't see that. So we come here and we got a disease, right? And typically we'll say, I'm being punished. No, you're being cured at the perispirit level, right? So your body will show that disease out pretty well, right? But it is a process that we can't fight with, right? It's just the law, right? There's nothing we can do against it. Can we make it better? Always, right? We can pray, we can do good things, we can help others. There's so many things we can do that make that smooth. Can we actually avoid the disease altogether? 100%. We don't need to go through it, right? But if we go through it, keep that in mind. That is the process of cure happening, like live, right? Because God is perfect. Okay? There you go. And I think that's all I have to say. Yeah. So that's kind of the same idea, right? So represent, I just changed the wrong way. Okay. There you go. Yeah. So that's the same idea, right? So the spirit carrying on, right? When I discarnate, right? So with all that negativity, next time I come back, so maybe I'll have increased risk of certain things, or maybe I'll decrease that risk by the actions and the things that I've lived through my life, right? In the process of evolution too, of the body and the spirit. Okay. So there you go. That's what I had to talk to you guys about today, about creation and evolution. If you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to address. Right, Raquel?
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
There you go.
We don't have anything on the internet today,
Okay.
but any comments, questions, confusions?
Yes.
Two comments, right? The first one you mentioned about the the God laws, etc.
Yeah.
We're in a special day today, right?
Yes.
It's related
Absolutely.
to Christ.
Yes.
In reading all Bibles, etc.,
Yeah.
we do bring this concept of miracle.
Yes. Yes.
And when we learn all that you just said,
Yeah.
we realize that miracles do not exist.
Correct.
Right? So it's just a way, something that we don't understand that someone can do, and
Yes.
therefore we believe that we
Yes.
call it miracle just
Correct.
because we can't do it.
Correct.
The second thing that is super cool that you mentioned today was I always talk to David, my son. You can learn by love, or you can learn by pain, right? You decide.
Yeah.
Actually, this completely applies to me as well.
Yeah.
As a parent, you do
Yeah, I
not
know.
realize that. You
Yeah.
just think, okay, I'm bigger than him,
Yeah.
therefore it's like
100%.
I know more.
Yeah.
But when we realize all the all the issues that we do in our life that create things on our body and or not, we do have a lot to learn.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Always. Yeah.
And it's just a matter of height, actually, right? It's not a matter of perfection between you and your son.
Oh, yeah.
It's just age and height.
Yeah.
And he's getting bigger.
Yeah.
And even that, it's quite possible that the two spirits may have a very complicated and long relationship that, much likely in every family, like the kid may be like an older spirit than the father. Like it doesn't
Oh, yeah.
matter, right? There's no, like in the spiritual sense, you're right. We're learning together always, no matter what relationship we are, right? If we came together as a family, if we came together as a father and son, or brothers and sisters and all of that, it doesn't matter the scenario, right? We're always learning together, right?
Yeah.
And that's the concept. And you're so right. Like when you're a parent or your father, mother, like every time something's happening and you have to apply that knowledge, right? You're also getting that same,
Oh,
like, you
100%.
right?
Yeah.
You ended up learning more, right?
Far
About the
more.
whole thing. Yeah.
So for two reasons. First of all, you try to be better.
Yeah.
Right. You try to feel to give example.
Yeah.
So you get better.
Yeah.
The second one is because when you apply, you have to.
Yeah.
That's the law. That's the law.
Yeah.
That's pain, gain, etc. Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
I know.
and then you realize.
It's like, oh yeah, I know.
oh,
Applies to me too.
Oh, yeah.
and you're right. In the idea of miracles, you're so right. Yeah, in the sense that we believe in miracles, yeah, they don't exist, because what really exists is that like so many things can happen that we actually don't know, right? So basically, the idea of the miracle originally is that something that I could not do, so therefore it has to be or I cannot explain, right?
Mhm.
So somehow it can be a miracle, just like the concepts of God started in the beginning, right? So there was the sun, so I cannot create the sun, so sun therefore has to be something beyond this creations, has to be some sort of God, right? Same idea of miracles and all that. And now the more we learn, the more we realize that we know very little, right, about all the potential things that can happen in the world. And when Jesus told us the idea of our faith and the mustard seed, and if we had the faith enough, like that size, we could do anything, right? That's such a brilliant vision of what we're talking about now, right? Because they're like whatever you see with your eyes, you actually have no clue like what you're looking at. Like there's so much more to that, right? That we just completely not grasp, right? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, excellent comments.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for those who joined us online. Have a lovely Sunday. We're gonna get our passes now.
Okay.